Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining me for today's webinar on fuel services and all the little details about them. One of the biggest things with fuel services is almost every car out there needs it. I really do believe that most customers trade their cars in prematurely because they don't have someone that they can trust that can advise them on doing things that's going to get their car to 200,000 miles. And a lot of times they trade it in because they just don't want to deal with the headache of a bunch of repairs. So I think fuel service is one of the biggest things that gets missed. And today we're going to talk about that. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat as we're going along. So the first question is, what is a fuel service, right? I've been in this industry for a long time, and I've heard everything from an induction service to a fuel cleaning to a gas mileage saver special to a liquid tune-up. And what we're really talking about today is a complete fuel system service. So that would include the injectors, it would include the induction service, it would include cleaning out the items in the tank that are going to cause more deposits and items like that. So one of the first things that you need to understand is, why is this happening? So what happens is during the burning process of fuel, just like when you have a campfire or you have a fire in your house, there's soot and debris that builds up, deposits that are left after the burn happens, right? Debris, build up, residues, whatever you want to call it. As those build up, they start to cause bigger problems because things are getting sticky and hard and not lubricated like they're supposed to be. We're seeing carbon buildup more now than we ever have before because of GDIs and a lot of other issues, which I'll talk about here in a second. But the one that you need to know is, if it is a gas engine, especially one that is using a blended fuel like ethanol, which we have everywhere in the United States, you're going to have carbon deposit problems. And a lot of times when you don't have severe problems, you'll end up finding out that these deposits are what clogs up your catalytic converter or creates other EGR issues or other issues inside the engine. So when I was a technician, we used to inspect every vehicle that came in, and one thing that we would always check is the throttle body. Take off the air boot, look in the throttle body. If the throttle body is dirty, especially dirty like this, you can pretty much understand that past it is dirty, and we'll talk about why here in a second. So there's three ways that the intake system gets dirty. The three most common ways are: one, what we're looking right now is the throttle body between the air filter and the intake of the engine. There will be debris that will get past the valves and blow up into the intake, and that is one of the places where the debris will build that we need to clean out to keep the engine running properly. So if you're seeing debris at the throttle body, you can imagine how dirty it is in the rest of the intake, and it was always a good determinant for us. I understand that nowadays on a lot of cars it's very difficult to look at the throttle body, and on most of these vehicles we can recommend it based on mileage because we know that it has so many miles on it, it's gonna be dirty just from our experience in the industry. The second way is the EGR system. So in the morning, the EGR system activates, and what it does is it takes hot exhaust gas, and it's hot, but it's also dirty, to run through the intake to warm up the air coming in the engine, to warm it up quicker so that it hits its emission standards faster. With that dirty exhaust gas, you will get the same kind of debris buildup. This is another reason that the throttles and the intakes get excessively dirty now. The third way is through the oil system. So in the bottom, there's oil. The pistons are pumping up and down, pumping up and down, pumping up and down, making a lot of air pressure, a lot of moving around, right? That has to be vented somewhere. So the PCV system runs it into the intake to burn it as it goes out. The downside of this is, if you're not maintaining your oil and keeping things clean, you will get oil debris up into that system. If you're replacing a lot of crankcase vent valves, PCV systems, if you have a Ford and the hoses are always deteriorating, this is why, is because the oil is acidic, it's eating that stuff and clogging those things up, and we see a lot more of those problems than we did before. Another thing that happens with this is that the injectors, when they're spraying on top of the pistons, if it's not clean and working properly and it's gunked up, that fuel will get by that system and go into the oil, make the oil evaporate even faster through the intake system, and it goes out through the cat. And this is usually what clogs up the cats prematurely. Now, there has been a very big change in the way that engines are designed. Every year they've got to get more fuel efficient and faster and lighter and et cetera, et cetera. So before, we had a port fuel injection system. So where you see the injector is where the fuel is coming, or the air is coming into the piston, and then it's going to go out. With this system, when that injector sprays, it sprays fuel on top of the valve and does a much better job of keeping it clean. Modern engines nowadays have direct injection cars where the injector is not spraying above the valve, but is spraying directly into the combustion chamber and creates a different set of issues that we've never dealt with before. When this one's spraying, you can see how it's not spraying on the valve and not washing off that carbon buildup. We call this injector washout. Some new manufacturers are coming out with dual injector purposed cars for the point of keeping the valves clean. They all realize that this is an issue. Most of those manufacturers are using our product to solve this problem because they didn't really understand it was going to be as bad as it was, just like we didn't either. So both of these are direct injection engines, and anything with a direct injection engine, I would definitely do a platinum fuel service on, which we'll talk about here in a second. So we talked about with the piston, right? So for people that are still learning here, air is going to come into the piston through the intake valve, and this is an example of a port fuel injector. And then that air is going to come into the cylinder, and then it's going to go out of the exhaust right after it does its job. What we're talking about doing with a fuel service is we're hooking up a pressurized chemical or a vacuum operated chemical. This service works on vacuum, and you hook it to anything, and what it does is it creates a very fine mist, and that very fine mist starts getting sucked into the intake and starts coating everything and loosening up deposits and cleaning everything, right? And then we rev the engine while we're doing that service, and it's going to suck it into the combustion chamber, mix everything up in the combustion chamber, clean the top of the piston, get your compression back up, and then it's going to go out the exhaust. When it goes out the exhaust, the product is so strong that it will clean out the catalytic converter also. Couple pictures for you. So here's a top of a piston before the service, and here is a top piston after the service. This is a valve before the service, and this is a valve after the service. You can see how much debris has been cleaned up. Now, in a direct injection car, it would work the same. So we would hook up the same apparatus to the intake pipe coming in, and you're going to suck that chemical in the same way. Now, you can see with this style injector, it's not going to spray on top of the valve. So the valve is going to get a lot dirtier and it gets baked on. It doesn't get cleaned like it used to. So when we do this service, you can see how it's spraying on top of the valve, and that's what's going to clean everything out and keep things moving the way that they are. The stuff is a lot harder to dissolve in a GDI car than it is in previous port fuel injection. It gets extremely hard. If you ever walnut blasted, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The platinum fuel service will dissolve this stuff. You don't want to just knock it off and blow it out the back. You've got to dissolve it so it won't clog up anything as it's getting cleaned up. Now, this is a picture of the tips of the injectors. They're a lot smaller than you think they are inside the piston. Now, as we zoom this in, look at the difference of how much gunk is in that tip versus the ones on the right. This is why using the fuel service stuff in a GDI engine increases the gas mileage and the horsepower by so much, because we're cleaning out those microscopic components that we're asking to do so much now that we never asked to do before. Next, another type of fuel service is doing a direct injection service. This is where you would literally hook up a pressurized apparatus to the fuel rail, disconnect the fuel's power, whether it's by the fuse or whatever's easiest in that chassis, and we're going to spray a cleaner directly into the intake and through the injector. Most of the shops that are using this are ones that are specifically trying to target injector issues, misfire because of injector issues, and this is a part of the plan that you would build for your fuel service packages, which we'll talk about here in a second. Now, when you are selling a package, whether it's the platinum service or the direct injection service, I would always recommend packaging it with 44K. 44K is going to take care of the entire system from the fuel tank all the way out the exhaust. It's going to clean the injectors. It's going to lubricate things. It's going to take care of the deposits in the tank before they get up to the engine, because as the fuel degrades, it creates deposits, okay? So this 44K is so strong, it will clean out the catalytic converter. We have a lot of people that have had really good feedback about using the product. Recently, I was given a loaner car because my car was in an accident, and I had 20.5 miles per gallon on this Ford Explorer. So I drove it 1,000 miles and I reset it and I put 44K in the tank. It went up to 29 and then it went back down to about 26 and it stayed at 26. But that's a huge increase on a modern car because these little items are getting so dirty and so clogged up so quickly that it really just destroys the performance of the vehicle, okay? Now, one thing that I would suggest that you do as a team when you start diving into fuel services or how you're going to recommend them, and look, we're here to help. If you have questions, let us know. We can sit down and we can talk about this. But really, as a shop, you need to figure out what your fuel service plan is going to be. What are you going to recommend? And then why are you going to recommend it at that interval? So you're all on the same path and you can explain it to the customer as a strong, united front. Most shops on modern cars are recommending the platinum fuel service every 15,000 miles. You might not get the customer to do it every 15,000 miles, but for the people that want to take care of their car, they will. And if you can't get them to do it every 15,000 miles, try to get them to do it at least every 2 years. If not, they're going to have a carbon-related issue down the road. We have a lot of fleets that do 44K every single oil change, and they'll go 10,000 miles per oil change, and they don't have a lot of problems. That's their solution for fuel issues currently, right? That because they got to get them in, they got to get them out, they got to do it quickly, right? It's all about how you want to package it to sell it to your customer. We have some shops, dealerships that recommend the fuel service through the injector directly because it's a service that they think is better fit for the customers that they see, and they'll get it 30,000 miles, or maybe it's 50, depending on the driving habits and the items that you see. All of these fall under the BG Lifetime Protection Plan. And again, if you have questions about building a plan for that, we can help you with that. But the first question that you guys have to kind of understand as a team is, why is it needed and when is it needed and what are we recommending and what is the issue? So first thing, anything that comes in for a misfire issue, whether it's check engine related or not, I would highly suggest that you start with this. We're solving a lot of issue on modern cars with cold start misfires with the platinum fuel service because the tips of the injectors get really carboned up, and guess what? They cause an issue. Next, any check engine light repairs. If it's related to any of the systems that could be touched by the fuel system, I would recommend doing the repair like an EGR and then also doing a fuel service afterwards to get all this stuff cleaned out. Also, the customer will notice the car is going to run a lot better. Next, any minor tune-up. Right? We don't replace spark plugs like we used to, so Mr. Customer, but we do a yearly fuel service for replace your air filter, and that's what we'd recommend to get your car to 200,000 miles and get you the gas mileage that you would expect out of this vehicle. Next, any preventative issue to keep it from happening again, right? We're recommending this because we don't want to see this problem down the road, especially if you're working on a kind of vehicle that you know has a specific fuel issue problem. A dirty intake, right? We inspected the air filter during our inspection and it's nasty. We're going to recommend doing a fuel service now. Consuming oil. Is the car consuming oil or is there a lack of power? With both those issues, it's really good to start with a platinum fuel service because most likely the thing is extremely gummed up and that's why you're having these issues in the first place. Emissions repairs, again, like a check engine light, if it's some emissions related, it's probably carboned up, and then you're probably going to need to do a fuel service with that repair, okay? Now, why do we recommend these intervals? And like I said, I want you as a team to sit down and figure out what interval you want to recommend why, because it's your shop, you have to stand behind it, and that's what you believe in, right? But I want you to understand the why. So we want to reduce future expensive repairs. That's a huge one for fuel services. I've had so many customers get cats cleaned up and they last for another 3 years because they did a fuel service to it, right? So there's a lot of items that you're not going to have issues with if you're doing fuel services. We want to restore performance. It's crazy how much these cars lose power in the first 3 or 4 years now. We have a lot of case studies to prove it if you're interested. But we want to keep their car running the way that it does. Next, extend the life of that car. If you really want to get 200,000 miles out of it, it would be very smart for you to do this and follow this plan. Save the customer money. You're going to save money in the long run compared to repairing the car and keeping things clean. We can look at the numbers every day and you'll see that it's always cheaper to maintain versus replace. Keep the car longer. Right now, the other thing is, what if somebody says, well, Peyton, I'm not going to keep it forever? Well, a maintained car with a lot of records is going to sell for a whole lot more money than a car that is got nothing done to it and you're just trying to get rid of the thing, right? And then the other thing is lesser chance of a comeback. For you as a shop, the last thing you want is that customer calling you and saying, hey, the thing still doesn't run as good as it should. If it has a misfire and all you're doing is replacing the spark plugs, you're going to have this happen. When you do the field service, it's going to clean everything out and get that car back to the power that it should be. And you're going to have a lot less phone calls of, oh, it doesn't seem like it's really 100% fixed. Because at this point, you have to do the field service to kind of complete the repair. So next, build a package that is easy for you to explain. Now, I'll tell you, everybody does this different because it's kind of whatever's easiest for you to explain. Some people will talk about a fuel service once the car's been looked at. Some people will talk about building a service for every 15,000 miles. We'll do the oil change, a fuel service, the oil cleaner, the oil additive, a cabin air filter, and a FrigiFresh service for $479.97, right? This is what we recommend as a yearly service. Because you know as well as I that the cabin's going to be dirty by then, the engine filter is going to be dirty by then, the throttle body is going to be dirty by then, it's going to need an extended life oil change, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the annual service is to keep your gas mileage up and prevent issues down the road. For your good customers that want to keep their cars forever, this is a really good recommendation. And again, if you feel more comfortable selling this package every 2 years, you can do that. But the problem is on GDIs, we're seeing that a 1-year fuel service is really what you need to do to keep it 100% clean and have no issues down the road. Also, with stuff like this, I found it was a lot easier as a service advisor to recommend it coming up, meaning, hey, you don't have to do it this visit, but at your next visit, you're going to be due for this. It's going to be about $500 because we're going to do a fuel system cleaning and we're going to do your filters and we're going to do all these items, right? People want to take care of their car, but if you always give them an opportunity to say, oh, don't worry about that, of course, they're always going to say no to it, right? What you need to remember is that it's about convenience for most customers. They're already there, they need to get it done, and they don't want to have a breakdown. This is the best way to prevent that from happening. The car's efficiency is going to increase. They will pay for the cost of the fuel service by the gas mileage they save alone, right? Also saving the money on future repairs, increase the reliability of the vehicle, right? The last thing somebody wants is to have an issue. And then also just having the time saved from not having to come back, right? So one of your best opportunities is try to get them to buy these services while they're with you. Now, if you struggle with selling this as a package, the other option is to get them to do the basic thing that they came in for, whatever's an oil change or whatever the case may be, have the technician look at the car, and then call them with the same items and say, hey, we looked over everything. The technician's recommending these items because of these reasons, and this is why we want to do this, right? So then it's easier for a service advisor. If you need help with this or have more questions, feel free to let me know. So a couple associated repairs. Again, if you're replacing spark plugs, the fuel service is going to get the performance back with the vehicle. If you don't do a fuel service with it, it's not going to run a whole lot better. And most of the carbon buildup is still going to be in there and it's going to cause a bigger issue. Check engine lights, right? The fuel service is going to clean out the deposit buildup that helped cause the problem, right? Oil consumption or burning. The fuel service is going to clean out the oil and the deposit buildup that is causing the consumption or burning in your car, right? This is a really good service to do for fuel, or for oil consumption, because what happens is the rings get all gumped up, the fuel service will clean it out, the compression will go up, they won't be burning so much oil. So customers, right? I always have a couple funny things that always happen to me over the years. This was one of my favorites. I've never done that before. That sounds dumb, right? So how do you get over that rebuttal with a customer? So I always have been a believer in laughing on the phone. Like, it's okay to laugh, like, ha ha. Well, I understand that you might think that it's dumb, but let me explain. We're doing more fuel services a day than we've ever done. Carbon buildup is more of a significant issue than it's ever been because modern engine design and ethanol in our fuel. We recently did one to my car, and I can tell you it runs much better. I know you will be happy with the service. See what they say, right? So you've got to remember that if you're going to recommend something, anybody is going to challenge you on that. And if you don't have the ability to explain why it's important the second time, they're never going to trust you about any other recommendations in the future. If they say something like that sounds dumb and you say, okay, well, never mind, let's move on to the next thing, right? You're a doctor looking at their car. Everything that you bring up is important, right? They need to know this stuff so they can make a smart decision. If they don't want to do it, that's fine, but they need to know what's going on so that they can make a smart decision. First thing I want you to learn in this process is empathize, right? So reassure them that you're listening to them and that you know that what they're saying is understood, right? I understand that you might think that this is dumb, right? I'm not blowing you off. I understand that you might think that this is dumb, okay? The other big one I'd get a lot is, it's not my owner's manual or book. Sally, I understand. We are doing more carbon buildup we are doing more carbon buildup related repairs than ever before. We have partnered with BG Products, which has a proven service to remove the harmful deposits that cause these issues. We recommend this service to anybody who wants to prevent expensive repairs later and keep their gas mileage where it should be. Can I get this done for you today? And then shut up. Shh. Let them think, okay? I have sold so many full services over the years because of the gas mileage line, because it gives them a reason to be able to cost justify the expense of doing the fuel service on the car, right? Some people just need that little checkbox. So that's a good one to kind of slide in your closing statement, okay? So again, we're emphasizing that we understood what she's talking about. Then we're going to work on educating them. Right? The line before that is called group buy-in, but we can talk about that more later. But what we're really doing is we're educating them to understand why it's important, right? If somebody challenges you on something, you can't just go, oh, don't worry about it, right? Well, if you bring it up and I say, I don't know if I really need that, I'm waiting for you to tell me why I do. They're really saying, hey, Peyton, explain to me what's really going on, why I need this or why it can wait, right? Lastly, remember to ask for the sale. A lot of times people lose sales because they just don't ask for them. So at the end, it's always easy just to ask, and all they have to do is say, yes, go ahead, and you can get the job done. That seems like a lot of money. We've all heard this one before, right? Mrs. Johnson, I understand. Let me explain the service, because what they're really saying is, I don't understand the value of what you're trying to sell to me. It just sounds like something that I don't get, right? So let me explain the service. One of our technicians will hook up a pressurized canister of cleaner to your intake and slowly release the chemical into the engine while revving your engine to make sure it's dispersed evenly. It takes about an hour. So now in their head, they get a little check mark of, oh, this isn't like just a kind of thing. They're actually like doing a whole system, and it takes an hour and a technician has to do it. That seems like, you know, it would cost not $7, right? It starts to make sense to them. After which we drive the car and whoosh, all the carbon buildup out of the tailpipe. So I used to say blowout, but I got kind of realized one time that might not be the best way to say you blow out stuff in your car. So we get all the carbon out, right? We're getting it out. We're doing a thorough service. You will notice how much better it will run, right? You're reassuring them that it is going to run better and it is going to be in better shape than it's just before the $200 they spent, right? Can I get it done for you today? So remember, we're empathizing, we're educating, and then we're asking for the sale, okay? Is this really needed, right? Now, with my customers, I like to really try to ask them when they drop the car off, what is the plan for this car? This is the easiest way to recover from most rebuttals, because they will tell you, I'm going to keep it till the wheels fall off, or it's my daughter's car, I'm not sure how long we're going to keep it because she's a bad driver and yada, yada, or whatever the story may be, right? We always have a story. So what you want to do is you want to tie that back in. Hey, Fred, you told me that you were taking, or excuse me, Fred, I know maintaining your car can be expensive. That's the empathize, excuse me. You told me you wanted to keep the car till the wheels fall off. Is that still the case? So then sometimes these things change, right? They had a car, they might have a kid, they might get rid of their kids, going to college, they don't need that car anymore. So reconfirm with them that's the reason, right? Because that's the reason I'm recommending it today. So oh yeah, I still want to keep it. If you think it's worth keep putting money into, I really don't want to buy another car if I don't have to. Okay, well, sounds good. Every time that you have this conversation with that customer, because remember, they're going to see you at least twice a year, you're just reassuring them that something's not going to pop up and just, that we all know that things happen, but they just don't want to be lied to. And if something happens, it happens, but they just want to know that they're making a smart decision, right? So you told me you want to keep the car till the wheels fall off. Is that still the case? Well, yes, my daughter's driving it. I don't want to buy another car. Well, then look, you really should do this. The service is going to keep a lot of expensive problems from happening down the road. It will also pay for itself in gas mileage alone. Can I get this done for you today? Right? And then wait for a response. Sometimes you got to listen and then you got to respond twice or 3 times. But you got to remember that cars are more expensive than they've ever been. They're more expensive to repair, and people need to know what their options are without someone just fear selling them and taking the time to educate them. And usually after you educate them and ask for the sale, they'll say yes. And then later, it might be 6 months, they'll tell you thank you. Hey, Peyton, I'm glad I did it. You're right. The car runs so much better, right? And that's the reason they come back to you. That's what makes you different than all the other shops around you, is that you were the one that stood up to them like a doctor and said, look, we need to take this serious. If you're really going to keep this thing forever, you need to start taking care of it, right? It's a benefit to you and it's a benefit to the customer. So real quick, the tool that we're talking about today is the Platinum tool with the Platinum kit. This is the KF65 kit. That is the best thing for you to use for GDI carbon buildup. This is what's designed by BG to prevent walnut blasting and carbon buildup and clogging cats and all that fun stuff that we're dealing with nowadays. We have a current promotion going on. Talk to your sales rep. If you buy 24 kits, we will give you the Platinum fuel tool for free. You'll still need to be able to purchase the adapters and this new cool tool that I'm going to show you here in 1 second. So while you're doing the fuel service, you really need to press the throttle 3 times every 60 seconds up to 3,500 RPMs. So here's a video of what happens inside of that intake. You'll see a big whoosh. See that big whoosh? That is what happens when the pedal is getting snapped. And the reason that we want that is that's what agitates all the chemical and gets it on all the carbon, and not just the carbon at the front of the intake, not the carbon at the back of the intake, but it gets it everywhere by agitating it, okay? Now, the tool that does this for you is called the BG Revit tool, and it attaches to the steering wheel, attaches to the pedal, it's air operated, and it'll pump the pedal for you so the technician can work on something else, like doing a brake flush or whatever other service they might be doing while the car can maintain itself and it gets the correct throttle snaps that it needs. I took a video of it doing on a car real quick, and I just did it in loop so you guys can see it going here. What it does is every 45 seconds, it's going to wrap the throttle 3 times, and then it'll wait 45 seconds. What's happening in that 45 seconds is it's building up the mist in the intake and collecting, and then when you wrap it, it agitates it and gets it everywhere that it needs to be. If you would like to get a free demo, please scan this QR code, and we will come out and we'll do one on your vehicle. And you can feel the performance difference and see what we're talking about and how easy this service is to do and how profitable that this service is. Now, a couple things to remember real quick. 1, listen. Listen to what they say when they drop the car off. They'll tell you, oh, I'm going to take a trip. I want to make sure everything's good on the car. That's a great time to bring up a service because they don't want to have an issue on a long road trip, right? When they come back to you with a question, make sure that you empathize with them and you let them know that you listened and you understand what they said, even if it's the dumbest thing you've ever heard. Look, Mr. Johnson, I understand how you feel. If I was you, I'd feel the same way. I've never heard of a fuel service before, but let me explain to you what it is and why we're recommending it, and then you can decide what you want to do. Right? Sometimes they want to fight with you, but you've got to stand your ground because you're the expert that they chose to bring the car to, and you've got to be the one that can stand your ground and say, look, I understand that this is expensive, but if you're really going to keep this car, you need to take care of it or you're going to have bigger issues down the road. Nobody can argue with you on that fact. Okay? Next, educate. you'll figure out which lines work better for you, whether it's, oh, there's carbon built up, or an engine's like a fireplace and soot builds up and we need to clean that soot up just like, you know, a chimney cleaner, right? Everybody has their little line that they'll do. I used to like we don't tune up cars like we used to. We do it every 10 years now. So we need to do fuel services every year to keep the car's performance so that in 10 years we tune it up and we just keep going, right? A lot of customers can understand that and relate to that. And then lastly, remember to ask for the sale. A lot of people forget to ask, don't ask. You'd be amazed how many times you'll sell this because you did ask, or you asked the second time or the third time. Please remember that customers want to keep their cars. Your job is to advise them on these options. If they choose not to do it, that's entirely up to them. But you need to let them know what these options are so that they can choose to take care of the car and they can really get the mileage out of the vehicle that they want and save a lot of money in the long run. All right, we're finishing up now. Let's see if we have any questions. Feel free to schedule one and we can come out there and do a fuel service demo with you on your own vehicle so you can see it, you can feel it. If you have any questions, feel free to message me directly or ask your rep. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you next time. Have a great week.